Advisory Committee as part of our CCO 2.0 process. Today's Rules Advisory Committee is solely dedicated to the non-emergency medical transportation rules. We'll give you just a little bit of context and history and overview of the process. Apologies to those of you that have been with us the better part of the week, either in person or on the phone. Important to provide this context for those of you that are joining us for the first time today. This rule right came from recognition of need that the existing CCO rule framework was not sufficient to support the new rules for CCO 2.0. To that point, we made a concerted effort to review and change rules for readability and alignment with the contract. In the context of improving readability and minimizing repetition within these rules, we made changes including edits for brevity and clarity, removing duplicate content, renumbering groups to like topics, including core structural rules, CCO contracting rules, coverage rules, financial rules, and removing outdated terms that are no longer used or incorrect citations, and renaming rules in certain situations or cases to improve clarity or explain purpose of each rule. We've also done some moving around in terms of definitions, both in local and universal definitions, and as I noted, to help align with the CCO contract. We've done so in collaboration with the Oregon Department of Justice, and we appreciate their assistance with this. In that context, as a high-level overview for the approach that was taken, we approached bilateral rights and obligations between CCOs and the state to be defined in contract. Third-party obligations, and when we say third-party, we speak of members and providers, are generally defined in rule, with rules providing a high-level structure for OHP and coordinated care organizations. We also have repealed approximately 14 rules throughout this process. One of those is an NEMT rule, which we will reference today. We also will reference that piece around the contracting arrangements. I would ask that anyone on the phone, please place your phone on mute at this time. We will go over the process for today's meeting momentarily. The process for today that we will use after we take roll both in the room and on the phone will be by show of hands in the room as we walk through the rules, and we will take logical section breaks to solicit for individuals to raise their hand to acknowledge that they would like to speak to an individual rule. Similarly, I will pause and find out what RAC members on the phone wish to participate in that topic and get in the queue. We will do our best to alternate between phone and in person. We want to make sure we afford all those people the same opportunity as individuals with us in the room today. We will take a 10-minute break, I'm thinking around probably 2:30 or so. At that time, both in the room and in the back and in the phone, I will solicit to see if there are individuals that wish to offer public comment. I will note that those public comments today should be limited to the proposed rule changes to be effective on January 1st. If anyone needs prior to that, restrooms are directly behind me in the hallway. I will ask that all individuals place their phone on mute or vibrate at this time. As we begin the rulemaking process here and convene this committee, just a little bit of additional context of which everyone has or should have available. The document over at the table entitled Rules Advisory Committee Participation. This really is what you should expect through this meeting and the process. I'm going to ask any individual on the phone to mute at this time. Thank you. The role of the RAC is advisory and consensus is not necessary. Our goal here and purpose is to seek public and stakeholder input to the maximum extent possible prior to giving notice of these rules being filed with the Secretary of State's office. This is a public meeting. It is being recorded. For those of you that have participated already in this week and visited the website or last week, you will note that the audio files of those meetings are already posted. So please be mindful of that. For substantive changes, which we will review, myself and/or our subject matter expert will field questions about those. To the extent that we can answer them, we will. Again, the purpose here is for us to glean information and recommendations from you. So the more time that we spend talking, the less time it affords you to offer the kinds of comments and input that we are hoping to glean from you today. How to provide input on your comments. We are time limited at 2 hours today. However, if we are not able to cover all the ground that we need to, even if we do, we are affording every seated RAC member the opportunity to provide additional follow-up written comments to us by email. That must occur within 7 days from today, so close of business 5 p.m. next Wednesday, we would need to receive your additional written comments. We're going to ask one favor of you in that, and this is General RAC number 7. When you do submit those comments to us, in the subject line, if you would be so kind as to put your organization's name and General RAC number 7. Given the fact that we are having 16 or 17 RACs in 16 or 17 days, we want to make sure that your request and your comments are posited correctly and that we are able to give them the attention that they warrant. So that is a standing offer. You have until close of business next Wednesday if you should not have opportunity today, or you are wind up going back to your offices and speak with colleagues and identify something else of issue or concern. You are free to do so. This next piece directed towards the general public, our guest in the back of the room today and on the phone. The next steps, following the input from this committee that the agency will process through the month of November and determine what changes we will make based on that feedback. On or about November 1st, the agency will publish the final proposed rules in the Secretary of State's bulletin, and that will begin the public comment period. They will go from November 1st to about November 18th. There will be a public hearing in this building on November 15th if anyone wishes to attend that to submit or provide comment at that time. And January 1st, the rules will become effective. So that is the housekeeping, and that is the overview of the process that we will go forward with. Again, in the room, we will begin with attendance here, then Kim will take attendance on the phone. Process being, we will go through each rule. Myself or Keon will make reference to changes and open for discussion at logical breakpoints there. So my name is Ralph Magrish. I'm your facilitator today. We'll begin to my right.
My name is Keon Mescoop. Thank you, Ralph. I'm the program manager for non-emergency medical transportation, NEMT. Thank you for everybody for coming today.
I'm Sarah Dobra. I'm spokesperson for the Oregon Health Authority and 0Z RAC participant. Sarah, did you get your microphone? Yeah.
And apologies for that. One of the most important ground rules of today's event is because we have a number of people in the room and a number of people on the phone that twofold actually. One, that you use the microphone as we have them placed around the room, and equally as important, before you speak or offer comment, we ask that you state your name and the organization you are representing today.
My name is Kurt Foster with Wapato Shores Transportation, and I'm a RAC member.
Thank you.
Carrie Trout, Salem Health, RAC member.
Chris Lyon, Lake Transit District, RAC member.
Dave Bailey from the ASAC, Multnomah County.
And Dave, I'll interrupt again. One of our challenges here is that we try to, we frown on acronyms based on the diversity of the group and recognition that some people may not know what that is. So if I can ask you.
I'm the co-facilitator of the Aging Services Advisory Council for the Multnomah County Aging, Disability, and Veteran Services Division.
Thank you. We appreciate you being here today.
This is Jessica Sayers, Pacific Source.
Ross Peterson with GridWorks. I'm here for Louis Reich, our Chief Operating Officer, who is a RAC member.
Great. Thank you.
Robin Traver from Umpqua Health Alliance.
Rachel Arnold, Health Share of Oregon. Cynthia Ackerman, All Care CCO.
Holly Penna, Oregon Law Center, RAC member.
Hi, Bill Bushka, Intercommunity Health Network Coordinating Care Organization.
Les Rogers, Healthcare for All Oregon.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Les Rogers, Healthcare for
Thank
All
you.
Oregon.
Thank you.
Casey Sonfleet, Eastern Oregon Coordinated Care Organization.
Rebecca Miller, Washington County Disability, Aging, and Veteran Services.
Thank you.
Orrin Johnson, Trillium Community Health Plan.
Thank you, Orrin. If I could ask and trouble you to do a name tent for yourself as well.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Melissa Hanks, Deputy Project Director for CCO 2.0 for the Oregon Health Authority.
Janet Zion Hall, supporting the project for the Oregon Health Authority.
Kim Stubenrauch, Oregon Health Authority.
And I'm going to ask Kim to take roll of RAC participants on the phone at this time.
And if I've missed anybody in the room, sorry. Also want to remind everybody that participants on the phone especially, that if you need to put us on mute, please put us on mute. We prefer you put us on mute, not on hold. Hold gets us your hold music, and it's difficult to communicate here in the room. So, very much appreciated. Okay, let's get started. Joelle Archibald.
Here.
John Curtis.
Yes.
Kristen Downey.
Here.
Annette Fowler.
Here.
Jarrett Hefner. Lori Hoffman. Christopher Isabel. Heather Jeffries. Aaron Jolly. Gerald Len. Cammie Miller. Julia Perani.
Present.
Tamara Powell. Louis Reif.
I'm here for Louis.
Okay. Jessica Sayer.
Over here.
Thank you. Ashley Smith. And Marcia Wenzel.
Present.
All right, thank you, Marcia. All right, I will go ahead. We will begin with the first rule. I will ask everyone on the phone if you will please mute yourself until we come off mute and solicit your opportunity to offer comment or feedback. The process that we will use, we will go through each rule. We will note where the substantive changes are in the rule and open that for comment. Also recognizing that all existing rules today are being renumbered and have been edited to improve for readability. As a matter of fact, we will be repealing the entirety of the existing rules and replacing them with this new rule set in January. Therefore, while we are not here to discuss non-substantive changes today, we do not want to slight you the opportunity to offer comment on any of the open rules in this set, despite the fact that we have not made substantive changes to them. So to that point, we will manage the clock. We note, obviously, that if there are issues or concerns that seated members have, you are also welcome to solicit those or provide those to us in writing, but we want to make sure that we have ample time for good, robust conversation and public comment. So we will begin with 410, 141, 3920, transportation, NEMT general requirements. The substantive change in this rule is the addition of number 5 and 6. We do not need to read those aloud for you. We will take a moment, though, to make sure everyone in the room has opportunity to review and on the phone. May I see by just a show of hands in the room first who wishes to ask questions, offer comment specific to these? All right, seeing 4, 5, 6 hands on this side of the table. Before we begin, may I check in with our seated RAC members on the phone? Please state your name only if you wish to speak to these proposed changes. All right, hearing none, I will circle back with you. Did I see Kirk first hand up? And I'll ask that we use the microphone. We'll just work our way along this side of the room. Kirk, go ahead.
Thank you. On this,
and I'm going to ask full name and organization for the benefit of everybody in the public and on the phone.
My name is Kurt Foster with Wapato Shores Accessible Transportation. On this, I believe it would be better to go with the what we have in the fee-for-service rules of the 30 days. Most members that I speak to want to schedule their rides well in advance. More than 70% of the membership are subscription type rides like dialysis that have their rides scheduled 30 or plus days in advance, and they would prefer to schedule, at least that's what I'm told by them, they would prefer to schedule in advance, and if we have the ride scheduled in advance, we can fix problems such as address mistakes, time mistakes, issues. So I believe that should be 30 days.
So Kirk, just to do a listen check, is the recommendation or request that 5A be changed from at least 24 hours to 30 days.
At least 30 days, yes.
All right. Thank you for your comment. We appreciate it. We'll continue down this side of the table.
Carrie Trapp, Salem Health. Please consider language for 24/7 hospital access with expedited process to avoid delays or alternate pathways for all patient class, emergency department, inpatient, OBS, outpatient procedures. We would also like the ability to schedule post-hospital appointments 1 to 3 days out from a hospital discharge.
Thank you for that comment. We appreciate
One more
it.
thing,
Sure,
sorry.
no problem.
We would also like some specific language surrounding how quickly we can have discharge pickup. We're recommending less than 59 minutes in a patient's best interest to be able to hit pharmacies and other things before they close.
All right, we appreciate that. And I think the gentleman,
Dave Daly, Multnomah County.
Red is on.
Dave Daly, Multnomah County Aging Services Advisory Council.
Okay.
5A, 24 hours in advance sometimes isn't realistic. It should be the prior day. So if I close a business the day before, it might be a more reasonable standard than asking for 24 hours in advance of the pickup. And in that same section, there's a lot of differences between different service agencies across the state in terms of how they handle same-day changes. If the person's appointment goes longer, if some people use open returns, some people make them book a return and then just deal with the changes that happen spontaneously in the day. But those need to be defined in the policy so that folks know how they're supposed to deal with it when the appointment goes over.
Thank you. Dave, can I ask just a follow-up of you, if you would, and just from the experience of facilitating these RACs this week and the reticence of people to leave things open-ended in the statement close of business, which could mean a different time of day amongst multiple plans, would you go so far as to propose a specific time?
Sure. I think that 5 in the afternoon ought to give them time to schedule for the next day, so 5 p.m.
Thank you. And Jessica Sayers from Pacific Source.
Yeah, excuse me, Jessica Sayers, Pacific Source. This is in relation to 6A. A comment earlier was notice of action should be changed to notice of adverse benefit determination. And then the second part of the sentence around providing a secondary review by another employee. That language was previously in the contested case hearing section.
Yes.
And I'm interested to hear from the OHA on the intent and expectation of adding that to all transportation requests.
Sure. Keon,
Denials, I should say.
are you able to speak to that?
Yeah, good question, or rather, thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question, Joe. You're correct. That was folded in. As Ralph mentioned, I think about 6 or 7 minutes ago, the contested case hearings, which is now the old 410, 141, 3475, was, I'll use the verb folded into this section 410, 141, 3920, as you can see here. And your question was to the intent. I don't have a specific answer to that right now. I can get back to you.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to understand is the reason behind the secondary review. Has there been a problem with initial denial reviews in NEMT as a whole, or I'm seeing a head nod next to me, but...
I think as a broad statement that I don't think should catch anyone by surprise, that the non-emergency medical transportation delivery system has been one that a number of individuals have paid a great deal of attention to and wanting to improve the quality of services all around. That is not identifying or suggesting that any one service delivery area should be treated any differently than any other, and trying to move all around quality improvement across the state, and I believe that this was an effort to help level set that across the state. So, and next down the line, Robin, go ahead.
Robin Traver from the Umpqua Health Alliance. Also on 6A, we would like to request that this be removed simply because it's not a requirement, from what I understand, for any other services. So that secondary review piece, we request that that be removed.
Okay, we will take that under consideration. Thank you. And continuing down the table, just I think we're going to go to Holly from...
Holly, Oregon Law Center.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Some things have been addressed here. A no-show by an NAMT provider is a denial of benefits, and I would like the health authority to discuss that and have some consideration for that. It is very problematic for members who have very critical healthcare needs and they are unable to go to their appointments. And somebody already mentioned some kind of guidelines for expectations of arrival times and pickup times. Some kind of oversight from the Oregon Health Authority would be wonderful that disallows the NEMT providers to be dropping off patients 2 hours before clinic opens or picking them up long after clinic closes and when it's dark in the winter, those kinds of things. Certainly the grievance process is there. I see you getting ready to speak to that. And then one other issue, provisions for what I would call patient stacking. Our drivers are frequently having difficulty addressing the specific needs of members because they have overbooked themselves with maybe 3 or 4 passengers in the car and are running to facility with these patients and back and forth, and that's creating issues. And again, it all comes back to sometimes a de facto denial of service.
Thank you.
Holly, thank you for the question. I think one of the topics in the room that is inevitable to come up today is the actual contract. As you all know, we're here talking about the OARs, the Oregon Administrative Rules, but at the same time, the contract is a very important document that's also gone through has gone through lots of work itself, and many of you are familiar with it. If you're not, I can share the URL later today. But I would like to, on that topic, discuss some of the highlights. From that, you mentioned some things about what I would call, in my words, benchmarks or thresholds about timeliness and so on. And on that topic, in the contract, for example, there are provisions, and I'll just read verbatim some examples that I've put together. Quote unquote, ensuring timely access for NEMT services, which must include arranging for NEMT services to be available in a timely manner. That's on page 26. There are other examples that I could give you, but rather than go through those right now, I'd like to give everybody else a chance to ask their questions, but certainly be happy to pepper those in throughout today to highlight some of the contract changes.
Thank you. I would like to comment that something that I commented on earlier this morning, many of the terms within the rules, and it sounds like in the contract as well, are on the vague side and would require further definition of what does constitute timely in this particular situation.
Yeah.
And we've captured that as well, but no, but appreciate,
make sure that's on the record.
Sure, and appreciate that for the benefit of those that are joining us for the first time. Absolutely. All right, can we continue around the room just by show of hands very quickly to see who else in the room wishes to speak to this? I'm going to do a check-in on the phone, and then we'll come back to Kirk Foster. Any participating RAC members on the phone wish to get in the queue to speak to the proposed changes to 3920? All right, hearing none. Kirk. We'll get him a mic. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Kirk Foster with Wampano Shores Accessible Transportation again. I wanted to just speak to one thing. My suggestion was that the CCO or broker be required to allow the member to schedule at least 30 days in advance, not that the member be required to do so, but any time up until 0 hour,
okay.
30 days. The other thing, I wasn't sure if where the appropriate place was to insert this. I noticed that you referenced third-party rights or obligations should be defined in the rules. There's nothing in this rule section that defines the rights of the members. And there's a series of things I think should be added as member rights. I don't know if that is appropriate here in the general section or if how that should be added. So I did have some things I wanted to suggest, but again, I don't know where that's appropriate.
Sure. So I can speak to that, and I appreciate your comments thus far. So there is a specific, as I think I noted earlier, this is the 7th of a series of RACs, of general topical RACs. Earlier this week, last week, at one of those, there is a dedicated member rights and responsibilities rule. With that said, I don't believe that it speaks or goes to details specific to non-emergency medical transportation. So that is certainly appropriate for you to make that comment and request a recommendation to the health authority for the recognition of individual consumer rights, member rights, specific to non-emergency medical transportation. So yes, if you would like to propose those now at this time or in writing or follow-up, we are happy to receive those.
I would like to just throw out the suggestion now.
Sure, absolutely.
I think that in keeping with the fee-for-service rules, the members should have a right to schedule at least 30 days in advance if they choose to, that they should retain the right to schedule as many trips as they want at a time for subscription rights such as dialysis, as in the current fee-for-service rules. I think they should also have a right to have an attendant present. Most members need it, and it presents an undue hardship to have to define that every time. I think that members should have a right to the vehicle type they request. That's also often becomes a problem and a source of conflict.
So what was that? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I think the members should have a right to the vehicle type they request.
Right to vehicle type, thank you.
Vehicle type, rather than have to redefine it at each phone call. I think that the members should have a right to choose a provider, much in the same way they can choose their medical provider. They should be able to choose their transportation provider. I think this would eliminate a lot of the concerns people have about substandards of service. And I think the members should be able to know who that provider will be within a reasonable amount of time after scheduling the ride, rather than having to wait till the same day or the arrival of the provider.
All right, thank you. We appreciate that. I see Dave Daly's hand up, and then I'm seeing Cynthia Ackerman, and then Bill Buska, so we will recognize those three individuals in order. Then I will do a check-in on the phone to see if anyone wishes to speak, and then we'll do a last round in the room.
Yeah, further to the comment from the end of the table here about timeliness, I think the most important time factor is what percentage of these patients do we get to their appointments on time? And I think timely doesn't really get it in terms of establishing a statewide program. It seems like we ought to have a standard. Sort of the low end of standards that you hear is around 90% of patients getting to their appointment on time. I've heard people with 95, but certainly we ought to have a standard, and we ought to require the CCOs to report their compliance against that standard.
All right, thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. I think we're headed down to Cynthia Ackerman from All Care.
Cynthia from All Care. This is just a matter of words on number 3. Neither a CCO nor any, I think it should be subcontracted transportation provider instead of contracted, just to keep in line with the other references.
Yes, appreciate that. Thank you. And we'll recognize Bill Bushka from IHN Samaritan.
Thank you. So this is a comment about 1, and the reference in the second sentence that says, in addition, the authority shall provide NEMT services to clients with, I'm not quite sure why there was a reference to the authority providing fee-for-service. It kind of confuses it. Does that mean that the authority has to follow all these rules for fee-for-service? I'm not quite sure.
Sure. I can take that, or if you'd like to. So that language, and we certainly can go back and look at it, I believe that language carries over from the original implementation of the brokerage model in the fee-for-service world in NEMT, and recognition at that time that there was a need to clearly identify who owned for lack of a better term, who owned the responsibility of providing transportation to members. And this was at that time an attempt to provide clarity that fee-for-service contracted brokerages will provide services for fee-for-service members, CCO contracted brokerages for CCO members. But if you think that could stand some wordsmithing or refreshing, we are happy to hear that. Or any specific recommendations you have. Delete it. All right. We hear you. Thank you. May I go back to the phone before I do a final loop in the room? Anyone, RAC participants that wish to offer comment or question specific to the general requirements rule?
Julia Pirani.
And anyone else? All right, we will recognize Julia Pirani from Care Oregon. Go ahead.
6, the grievance and appeal process citations, going back to the MCE service authorizations. The one concern we would have if there's no clarity on this language of following the MCE service authorizations is that there's stipulations about the requesting provider being notified for adverse benefit determinations. And usually the medical provider or the transport provider would not be involved in an individual member's request. So I think some clarity added to 6 would be helpful.
And can I ask, I appreciate that, can I ask for clarity's sake about the clarity, are you suggesting or requesting that, and I'm just doing a listen check only, that NEMT providers be included or excluded from those that can request that, file that grievance or complaint? I'm just trying to follow.
No, it's the notice of adverse benefit determination clause in the MCE service authorizations,
okay.
Where it cites on number 6, the language in the MCE authorizations requires that providers are notified along with members.
Right.
And we would not want medical providers nor transport providers to specifically be notified per member transport request under NEMT.
All right, we appreciate that comment. Thank you. Did that comment spur any additional comments or feedback in the room? I'm thinking so. Let me recognize Cynthia Ackerman from AllCare.
I guess I disagree, just because if it results in a member missing an appointment, I think it's very important, because providers do track that, and it could have an adverse effect on the member's relationship with the provider.
Thank you for that comment. Appreciate both of you. I'm going to do one last call in the room specific to this rule. We will recognize Ross from GridWorks.
I wasn't clear where we landed with the same day and advance notice reservations, but I wanted to express our support for 5B, that members should have access to same-day services as a non-emergency benefit. We think the benefit needs to be at least as accessible as emergency services, if not more, if our goal is to prevent unnecessary utilization of emergency services. So whatever changes are made to prior notice requirements, I want to make sure that members still have the ability to call same day.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you, Ross. And just as a point of clarification to all members, we won't be landing per se anywhere today and making decisions. We are receiving your comments and feedback, so we do appreciate that. Thank you. Last chance, anyone in the room or on the phone? All right. Hearing none, we will move along to the next rule. That is 410-141, 3925. The only changes to this rule were the revisions and updates specific to background check and correcting the statutory citation. With that said, we are committed to having robust dialogue. If there is issue or people wish to submit comment or feedback on all the rules that are open, I will solicit in the room and on the phone first. On the phone, may I just get name only of individuals wishing to speak? All right, hearing none, we're going to try to mix it up and be fair to everyone. We're going to start with Chris Lyon from Lane Transportation District. We will then go to Jessica from Pacific Source, and then to Kirk Foster and anyone else that wishes to engage. Go ahead, Chris.
Chris Lyon, Lane Transit District. I just want to ask for consideration to look at the background checks that are done by TNCs, and would those background checks also be acceptable to OHA in bringing them into performing NEMT trips. Because right now the types of background checks that they do not include fingerprints, which is currently a requirement. If that's the case, we may need to relook at other background checks, but I think it would be prudent to begin to look at bringing in additional forms of transportation to provide.
Okay. And we appreciate that comment. Thank you. Actually, I want to make sure. Well, I suspect that Jessica will let Dave jump in. Dave, go ahead.
Just, this is Dave Daly, Aging Services Advisory Council, Multnomah County, sort of reinforcing what Chris said. This whole section sort of provides the ability to use TNCs because you've got background checks, you've got Red Cross First Aid, you've got all kinds of requirements here that TNCs typically don't meet. And with them having expanded so much, a lot of the taxi resources that we used to use are gone. And we're struggling to find replacement resources for those. So some way or another, we have to be able to figure out how to use TNCs effectively. And going back at this section is going to be something that's very important there.
Okay.
That's a general comment. One specific comment
Sure.
At the top there, and it had to do with ambulance and stretcher cars not needing to comply with the driver certification requirements in here. A lot of times you have ambulance companies doing Medicar trips for you, and they're using a state-certified EMT as a driver, and it doesn't really cover that situation here. Do they have to get double certified, or should we be able to use the EMT certification to replace the driver certification when they're driving Medicar that day instead of ambulance?
So I'm hearing, so first in recognition of the TNC issue, thank you, and we hear you, and we accept that comment. What I'm hearing on number one, just to do a listen check, is the exploration of some kind of reciprocity for ambulance drivers who may be responsive to NEMT calls. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Acronym check.
Acronym check. Transportation Network Companies. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Say again?
Transportation Network Companies.
Uber
All right.
Thank you.
Continuing down that side of the room, whoever did not have opportunity to speak, Jessica.
Yeah, Jessica Sayers, Pacific Source. This is a little less boring than the previous one, but under 4B.
4B.
No, that's exciting stuff. This is just around record retention.
Okay.
The record retention in here is for 3 calendar years. Currently, record retention in CCO world is 10 years. So I would like to know if this is an exception to the 10-year retention, or if it should be 10.
Sure. We will look into that and respond accordingly in the final proposed version. And I thank you for bringing that to our attention. Let's go down to the end of the table with Holly from Legal.
Cynthia first.
Cynthia Ackerman from All Care, then Holly. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Hey, Cynthia from All Care. I just wondered if it was appropriate in for A or B to have a check against the exclusion list as well, because we require that of all other subcontractors.
Yes, thank you for that comment and feedback. Appreciate it.
And I may have missed something, but I'm not finding anything in this set of rules that requires a provision that all drivers follow the driving laws of their state when they're providing transportation. I see all this background stuff that needs to be done, and these other elements that need to be performed prior to becoming a driver.
All right, we thank you for bringing that to our attention too. Ross, let me just jump around a little bit and then we will circle back. And I want to make sure that all the other individuals at the other end of the table have opportunity. We will first recognize Rebecca Miller and then we will come back to Ross from GridWorks.
This is Rebecca Miller with Washington County Disability, Aging, and Veterans Services. I would like to assert that, request that I'm looking for the number 5B, D, the time that a driver has to complete certain trainings is now 6 months. I think that is, it's too long.
Too long.
Too long.
And would you go so far as to make a recommendation? 3 months. Thank you. All right. We will recognize Ross.
Thank you. Ross Peterson with GridWorks. Oh, Mike. Ross Peterson with GridWorks. I support reducing the grace period on driver trainer requirements. We currently require training before passengers are transported. I would also like to suggest that if standards are changed for companies, that members are given an opportunity to ride with transportation network companies like Uber or Lyft, or with cab companies based on their needs. So if a member needs a ambulatory curb-to-curb ride and does not need additional assistance from the driver, we think that is essentially the rationale for reducing the driver training requirements. But we would not want to see members inappropriately matched to TNC services. So I'd like to suggest that it's tied to a needs assessment, and that members who have the need for ambulatory curb-to-curb services have the ability to access taxis or TNCs, and that these other driver training standards not apply to those types of transportation, but still continue to apply to the types of transportation where that level of need is present.
All right, thank you. We appreciate that. Let me do a check-in on the phone really quick, and then we'll circle back. I'm seeing a couple people additional requests. Anyone on the phone wishing to get in the queue to speak to these?
Yes, John Curtis.
And anyone other than John? All right, let us have John speak, and then we'll resume in the room. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, my comment goes to Part 5. I'm wondering if it isn't appropriate to have some training on accommodation or disability sensitivity.
Thank you for that comment. We do appreciate it. All right. Can I just see by a show of hands again in the room? Let's go Kirk, Robin, Dave, and then back to Rebecca. Kirk, go ahead.
This is Kirk with Wapato Shores Accessible Transportation. A few things on vehicle requirements specifically. That's more my specialty. Under rule number 2, I think there should be an addition that every wheelchair van used in the program should be ADA compliant. There has been a problem with non-ADA compliant wheelchair vans showing up for rides. Moving on to number 3, including but not limited to the following equipment. Working HVAC systems, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning should also be included. That's also become a problem, especially with our significant change in climate. I agree with Ross and Rebecca that we should reduce it to 3 months as far as the background check requirement, or the training requirements. 6 months is excessive, I think.
Okay.
As far as the background checks for using alternative modes of transportation like TNCs, I think reducing the level of training we're providing is going in the wrong direction, and I think that, and so I'm concerned about that. I am especially concerned about reducing the level of background checks. I don't think there should be any step backwards in protecting, or at least keeping vulnerable populations safe from any kind of nefarious drivers.
All right. Thank you for that. We'll go to Dave and then Robin and then over to Rebecca.
Dave Daly at Multnomah County Aging Services Advisory Council. I just don't agree with the segregating what kind of service by curb to curb or door to door. The problem you have there is that the passenger may want to use a TNC Uber Lyft type of service, and they say that they're curb to curb, and maybe they don't ambulate so well. And these people are going to get hurt in between the door of the vehicle and the vehicle. I mean, the door of their residence in the vehicle. So I think it's very important to look at every single one of those pickups and make a determination, does this person need assistance? And be in position as the driver to provide that assistance, and we can't start saying, oh, it's okay to be curb to curb, because we're going to get somebody hurt that way.
All right, thank you for that, sir. We're going to go to Robin and then over to Rebecca.
This is Robin from UHA. I would just like to support what was stated a few minutes ago under section 2CH, adding the words "and secure," so it reads, all equipment necessary to transport and secure members using wheelchairs or stretchers. And then under 3, adding to the following, adding the equipment, working heat and air conditioning.
And that's consistent with Kirk's comment, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And we will come back over to Rebecca Miller from Washington County.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Do the number of times you hear a particular comment make a difference in a rural advisory committee?
That's a fine question. I think that to that point, the number of times that we do hear the same comment consistently provides a reinforcement of the severity of the issue and how we approach it or consider it. I think that when we hear from both advocates and plans the same message, that is something that we take very seriously, as we do every issue, but noting that that there are parties that normally come from different or divergent opinions, that when they come together and are in consensus or agreement that something should be done in the name of policy or consumer protections, then yes, that carries significant weight.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So my additional comments, I had suggested the 3 months, and I tell you that is a number that I don't have a basis for saying 3 months. I just think it should be less than 6.
Okay.
I would leave it to you going back and doing your work to figure out what is available. I know advocates would say before you get behind a wheel, you know how to work with the person that you're serving. My other comment is around working across cultures, working across language, working with people with mental health conditions. I don't see any of that in here. And maybe it's captured in general in other rules, but I don't.
Sure. So appreciate the comment. Absolutely will respond to that. And that for a number of folks that have been with us for the better part of the weeks, that the rules occur in the totality, of which there are approximately 85 managed care, coordinated care organization rules that are broadly applicable. So entire sections on consumer rights, consumer protections, prior authorizations, et cetera, are broadly applicable. One of the challenges that we're having in this model that we're going to, that we believe is the right approach to bring a structure to them that did not exist previously, is to try to find just that sweet spot of recognizing the applicability of of rules that may be subject to NEMT program requirements, that could be to any other given program as well, but still maintaining and trying to produce a document that is meaningful and is easy to read for individuals that pick it up, and not something that becomes unwieldingly large or redundant and repeats the same thing in each section. So that's the balance that we're working for there.
And so by reference, it would reflect back to those sections?
Yes, or conceivably in one of those sections, we may look at it, and even though it is implied, we may affirm this shall be applicable to, and list the NEMT rules as well. So that's one vehicle to accomplish that as well in cross-referencing. So we can certainly take that piece under advisement. Thank you. Can I do a check on the phone very quick? Anyone else that wishes to engage? Last call in the room by show of hands.
Marcia Wenzel.
Marcia, go ahead.
2 points. I would like to, again, echo on the AC heating. Be aware that there are 2 areas in a van that needs to be functioning. Not only to the one in the front to comfort the driver, but the people in the back. There are very often the back is not working. The driver is fine. Second point, I'd like to give you a visual on the door-to-door service versus passing the baton, where the driver takes a person to a point where there is someone who can look over them.
Thank you. We appreciate that. All right. I am going to move us along to 410, 141, 3930. This is out of service area and out of state transportation. This is a rule that received no substantive revisions at all. With that said, though, I will ask just for by show of hands first in the room, anyone that wishes to offer comment or question about it. I'm seeing one hand in the room, two hands in the room. May I check in, 3 hands in the room. May I check in on the phone just to see if anyone will wish to speak to this particular rule? All right, we will start in the room here. And Holly, go ahead.
Holly Pennick, Oregon Law Center. This comment comes from a colleague on 1D, possibly delete not available in Oregon, because that is implied by OHP covered. Is a pre-authorization required to get OHP to cover services outside the county or state? Such you could say the MCE shall provide any MT services to or from any provider of a pre-authorized service regardless of that provider's location.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. And staying on this side of the room, my apologies, I think that was Carrie from Salem Health.
Sure. Carrie from Salem Health. Again, I would ask for inclusion of language that confirms 24/7 access for hospitals to be able to have access to transportation.
Thank you. And we'll go to Jessica and then Robin.
Yeah, Jessica Sayer, specific source. This is in relation to 1D as well. I think part of what we experience is out-of-area providers have a really hard time grasping the need for them to get a Medicaid ID number in order to provide services. So I think reinforcing that language and that requirement in this section will be really helpful.
Are you, just to do a listen check, are you requesting or asking that language be added to that describes or the requirement that all providers be enrolled?
Or even the citation to the non-participating provider rule.
Okay.
That would link the two.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. And for everyone on the phone, let's give a little context to that as well, that seemingly there are out-of-state providers that are reticent to do a one-off provider agreement or take the time to even do a condensed application with Oregon Medicaid despite quick adjudication of that. But I'm hearing the suggestion that if we were just to add by reference that other rule that requires that, that would help plans and their contracted brokerages in working with those providers and saying, hey, there is a requirement here. Is that
stated very well?
All right, good, very good. All right, staying, I think we'll go to Robin. You're good? All right, show of hands in the room. Check in on the phone. Anyone, first name only, that wishes to speak to this rule, 3930.
Julia?
Julia, go ahead.
Actually, just have a clarifying question for the statement that was requesting that 24/7 hospital access be included in this rule set. I'm just trying to figure out where that would even be applicable in this situation.
Carrie, do you wish to, I guess she's making a point relative to out-of-state services. Would that be prudent in this particular?
I'm talking out of service area.
Out of service area. So it could very much be, I think, to the point that Carrie made, specific to out of service area, to a lesser degree out of state.
Yes.
Does that provide clarification, Julia?
Yes and no.
Okay.
In terms of how the question is what proposed language or how would the 24/7 hospital access included in the out of service area be integrated into this rule language? If there's a possible concrete example, it would just be helpful to hear ahead of time.
Sure. So again, because this is an advisory committee and we're here to get input from you all, I will invite Carrie if she wants to describe a hypothetical scenario in that. If she chooses not to, that's absolutely fine as well.
No.
Okay. All right. We did receive the comment, though. We will review it in the totality of all comments received and look at it in the context of both in-state providers, where the point was made previously, and specific to this rule. I think Sarah Dobra wished to be recognized.
Sarah Dobra, spokesperson, Oregon Health Authority. This may be addressed in the other areas of that rules, but I did want to mention here calling out for within state or a member who has moved from their current CCO service area and will be enrolling into a new CCO, but still remains enrolled in the old CCO, calling out the need to still provide transportation outside of the current CCO's service area.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it. All right, I'm going to do one last circle in the room. Anyone by show of hands or individuals on the phone? All right, we are going to move along to 410, 141, 39, 35. The only substantive change to this rule was in number 1 in the first line. The rule applies to NEMT for children under 12 years of age who are eligible for NEMT services. Previously, it was of 12 years of age.
You mean 15?
15, thank you. Well, it was 12.
Yeah. It was 12.
It was 12.
Now 15.
And it is now 15. Can I do a check-in first on the phone? Anyone that would wish to speak to this?
John Curtis.
Okay, John, anyone else? All right, let's have John go first, and then we will go to Chris Lyon from LTD, and then Holly from Legal Aid of Oregon, and then Carrie Trapp, and then Orrin Johnson from Trillium, and then the gentleman, Les Rogers. So we're going to have quite a conversation here, I think, which is fine. What we will do is probably, depending on the length of this, just before we get started, this may step on the toes of a scheduled break. I think it's a little early to do that, so no one should take offense if I do pause this conversation in midpoint. We will pick up accordingly. Chris, go ahead. Or yes, John, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, I would suggest that the attendant rule .5 be moved up to the front of the rule for clarity. I also question the use of attendant and its interchangeability with caregiver. And then I also question the definition of special needs and what exactly that means.
All right, thank you. Let's pause. I'll offer Keon opportunity to respond. We may need to take the special needs response offline, but I welcome him to respond, and if we can get him a microphone.
Okay, John, thank you for your question. We don't have a immediate answer, but I understand. I note and acknowledge your question about what sound to be operational definitions of those terms, so thank you.
All right, we'll go to Chris in the room.
I just want to make a comment about the change in age.
Okay.
While I don't personally disagree with it, I do know of foster children, 13, 14, that we do transport from school to treatment. If we have to also include parent, guardian, attendant, that is going to, if we have to go pick up a guardian to go then pick up the school and then take the person to treatment, that's going to increase cost. And I don't necessarily think it's necessary.
Okay, thank you for that comment. We will stay along this side of the room. I think, Dave, did you wish to speak before Jessica? All right, we'll go to Jessica, then Ross.
Yeah, Jessica, Pacific Source. In number 2, it talks about parents or guardians providing blah, 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 to and from medical appointments. It's not just medical appointments that are eligible for NEMT, so I suggest changing that to covered healthcare services or something to that effect.
Thank you very much for that. And Ross, go ahead.
The last sentence of paragraph 1 has some unnecessary words in it. I think it should read, the rule also applies to members with special physical or developmental needs regardless of age.
Thank you for that comment. We do appreciate it. And continuing down this side of the room, Holly.
Holly Bennett, Oregon Law Center. Number 2, we would like consideration to be given to parents or guardians who have a working parent and only one car in the family and a special needs child who may not have an attendant, and school is very important, they must be picked up at school, that the parent be picked up first at their home, even if they are 30 miles out in the country.
Thank you for that. We appreciate. We will go to around the table to Bill Bushka.
This is Bill Bushka from IHNCCO. I have a question first. Can an attendant be picked up before the rider is picked up? Before the...
So we probably, Keon, if you're able to speak to that, great. If not, we'll need to...
Can the attendant be picked up before the member is picked up?
Bill, we're supposed to take a break in 1 minute, and there's a shorter answer, maybe a long answer, and to do justice to the answers, I think maybe we can table that and come back to you if that's all right with you.
Well, actually, Keon, if you're okay, let's continue. I'd like to not break up in the middle of an individu's comment or question.
Can we get him a microphone? Does it work?
Yeah.
No, for you.
Oh, for me?
Oh, microphone.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was saying, Bill, there's a short answer and there's a long answer, and as I understand your question, can the attendant be picked up before the member? As I said, I don't have an immediate answer right now, extemporaneously, but I'd be happy to get one for you and the group.
So,
okay, so I get to my question then. So this was around increasing the age to 15 years from 12. I think it's going to decrease the amount of young people that we want to be able to access healthcare, and especially mental health services, so that a young person, 13, 14-year-old who's at school and is capable of going to their mental health appointment or some other appointment isn't going to be able to do that because they have no way to get there. And if their attendant is at home, then the attendant has to get to school, and that may or may not be possible because the rider can't pick up the attendant at home and then go to school to pick up the child and then go to the provider. So I see this as a significant limitation of access to especially behavioral health services for young people, where we really want to increase access, not decrease it. This is putting in a barrier, the sequence of how this works.
Thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate your question and your comment, and particularly your comment about the sequence. I think that was a small wrinkle to the comment that Chris provided. I'd be happy to explain a little bit about the age threshold. We did an informal survey of other states. Oregon is at the lower end of the spectrum. So we've, as you guys know, as everybody knows, we have 12 right now. But I can tell you with respect to other states, for example, we decided, well, we looked at Texas, Michigan, Colorado, West Virginia, Kansas. And Kansas was 17, West Virginia was 16. I could go on, and I think, as you can imagine, it's a difficult balance to strike. On one hand, I hear what Chris is saying, and I also appreciate your comments as well. So with that, I'd just like to say that I acknowledge your points and that those comments will be taken into consideration.
Can I have follow-up?
Yes.
So I would ask then that there be some consideration given to the attendant being able to be picked up before the young person is picked up.
all right, we appreciate that comment. Thank you. Let us continue around the room, and we'll go to, I think it's that Les. I'm sorry, thank you.
Les Rogers, Healthcare for All, Oregon. You know, I'm as a parent of somebody that experiences cerebral palsy, we often have to rely on PSWs to help transfer her because I'm not always there to lift. And so that's just what's going through my head as I hear attendant. I just want to make sure that we're considering, you know, direct support professionals and PSWs as we think about this rule, and that it may not just be a parent that needs to be there to do, and maybe others as well. And I know that complicates things, but I just want to make sure that we're addressing that, you know, the parent's okay to bring a PSW with them if they need it.
So Les, first we appreciate your comments. Secondly, we appreciate your sharing the personal insights that you bring to it. But thirdly, I have to ask for help with the acronym because it's
personal support worker.
Personal support worker.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And a direct support professional, I think, is the other one.
Thank you. Appreciate. Okay. And did you have additional or?
That was it.
Okay.
I just, you know, as I'm reading through the rest of it, I'm just thinking about how does that play out, and what is the definition of attendant relative to how Medicaid's actually delivered in the state through the CAPE waiver?
Is there, I mean, if you would like to propose a modification?
I would recommend that we put in, you know, because there's these two different acronyms we use in the state for these kind of workers, we could just put in caregiver. I mean, we say attendant here, but I'm thinking about how it plays out relative to how Medicaid's delivered in the state, you know, and again, the acronyms could change again
Sure.
before the next cycle's up, but I just think we should probably address that.
Thank you. Appreciate. And we'll recognize, I think, is that Casey?
Casey Slonfleet, Eastern Oregon CCO. I also would like to agree with Bill with being able to pick up an attendant prior to the member. Given the large service area we have out in Eastern Oregon, over the 12 counties, it's a big struggle providing transportation for single households and the parents or guardians not having access to their own transportation, but do need to be there with their child or adolescent in the medical appointment or behavioral as well.
Okay, thank you. We do appreciate. All right, it is 2:35. I'm going to park us for 10 minutes. We will resume with this one. We will resume, friends, promptly at 2:45. Before everyone gets up, and I put the phone on mute, may I check in with the general public participating by phone? Is there anyone with us by phone today that would wish to offer public comment at the end? Please state your name at this time. All right, we will resume at 2:45. Thank you. And we will get started. During the break, I had a little conversation with my colleagues. We are going to make some adjustments to manage the clock here. We will time limit the rest of the conversation on this particular rule to 10 minutes. After that, we will speak to those handful of rules, I believe 2 or 3 left, that there were material changes to. There are 2 or 3 rules here that we will note out loud at this time that, thank you, had no changes whatsoever. I'm going to say what those are at this time. Those were 410, 141, 3940. That was secured transports. And 410, 141, 3945, ground and ambulance transports. No changes were made to those. With that said, and honoring our commitment that we will make sure that you have opportunity to still offer comment on those. If time permits, we will return to them. If not, those 2 rules, if you wish to offer comment, you should do so in writing within 7 business days to us. So we're going to time limit the rest of the conversation on 3935 to 10 minutes. I'm starting the timer now, and then we will move to the other ones. Apologies, I think Kirk may have had, Oren from Trillium. Let's get Oren a microphone.
Thank you, Oren. Thank you. Oren Johnson from Trillium. This question crosses over between this rule and the draft CCO contract, in which the draft CCO contract has a section discussing determining the appropriate mode of transportation to meet the needs of the member, and it includes in there is the member under the age of 18 and will be accompanied by an adult. So I think for consistency's sake, just being sure between this rule and the CCO contract rule, the expectation of what age should a member have an attendant, a caregiver, or an accompanied adult.
Thank you for that. We do appreciate it. And we will recognize first Ross, then Cynthia, and then Robin.
I understand the need to achieve some level of parity with other state policy, but I think it would be helpful to understand what the substantive need is that this policy change is trying to address. Just matching other states doesn't seem like enough of a reason to change policy, especially given the comments that are made today about kids getting to school and so forth. If you could comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
Can we get a microphone? Sorry.
We have 2 here.
All right.
Well, share.
Thank you, Ross. Yeah, that's I appreciate that comment, and I hear what you're saying about simply changing the age to achieve parity with other states. I appreciate that comment. How should I say this? I think the rule is somewhat of an artifact, if I may use that word. The age threshold, I would say, is an artifact. I think upon closer examination, albeit comparison to other states, it may manifest as perhaps having been set too low. That's somewhat of the consensus that we've arrived at preliminarily. Certainly, your input is important and valid, just like everyone else's. And as I said, I appreciate that input about simply changing it to mirror or match other states' But what we did find through an informal survey was that Oregon is on the tail end of a spectrum that goes up to 17 in Kansas. Texas is 15, for example. I think one other thing I'll mention, and then I'll be quiet, is that important to think about the geography of certain states here in Oregon. I'm not originally from here, but I understand that the geography is such that we need to maybe consult Washington State or California to the south, and in any case, important to think of the context and the unintended consequences and ramifications, of course, about changing the age effective.
Right. And let's recognize Cynthia from All Care.
Yes, Cynthia from All Care. My first comment has to do with the age, under 15 years. I think if we looked at it from a standpoint of age of consent, and there are varying ages of consent in Oregon for family planning, for accessing mental health and substance use treatment, and physical health. So I think that is where we should look at this from. Just a suggestion. And that carries down into 2. Someone sent me some suggestions that it would go to a D, which would also include children or young adults accessing mental health or substance use treatment, because again, the age of consent is different. I believe 14 is family planning and mental health. That's all.
No, thank you for the comments. That is truly a member-centric comment, and we appreciate that. All right, we will go to, I think, Robin Traver, if I'm not mistaken.
Robin from Umpqua Health. I just wanted to clarify or suggest that there be language if there are specific CCO requirements to enforce any of these rules. For example, in Section 8, there's a requirement that the attendants remain with the member during the appointment. Is that something that the CCO, what is the CCO's requirement
So
there?
at a high level, the transportation contractor is the CCO subcontractor. These rules upheld that it is the CCO's responsibility to ensure that their contracted providers meet the intent of the administrative rules.
So essentially it would be we would be monitoring the NEMT provider to make sure that they are enforcing this?
That's correct.
Okay. And then I have a question on Section 7. The CCO may not bill additional charges for a member's attendant. What is this referring to?
Sure. Keon, are you able to speak to that?
I'm hearkening back to the old rules. I think there may have been language in there specifically about this part.
Can you use the microphone?
Sorry.
Thank you.
With OJ, thank you for that question. I think I'm hearkening in my mind back to the previous text from the old rules, which will become defunct. And I don't want to misstate what that language was, but I think it's actually similar to what Les was describing about PSWs and other types of caregivers. And that's, I think, what those charges in this sentence may refer to. Chris, do you have something? Yeah.
She has one.
So if you take a taxi, quite often there is a drop fee and an extra passenger fee. Under NEMT, there is no charge for that extra passenger because they cannot charge us for an attendant. So that's where that rule stems from.
Okay.
So just to summarize, the CCO doesn't bill charges. Does this mean that the broker or the NEMT provider cannot charge for the attendant? Is that what?
That is correct.
Yes. Thank you.
Sure. We are time limited at 3 minutes and 12 seconds. I'm committed to honoring that. So if there are other individuals in the room or on the phone, I'm seeing one hand in the room. Let me do a phone check-in. Anyone on the phone? All right. We'll recognize Kirk Foster, and then we will close conversation on this particular rule.
Kirk Foster, Walker Shore Successful Transportation. If we move to requiring the CCO or the transportation provider to take a dog leg or an extra trip or leg on the ride to pick up an attendant, we would have to modify number 7 to allow compensation for that mileage.
All right. Thank you for that. All right, I am going to close conversation on 410, 141, 3935. Again, friendly reminder, you get back to your office or speak with colleagues and something jogs in your head that you wish to submit, please do so. I am going to move us along to 410, 141, 3950. This is modifications for individuals with disabilities. I'm going to note that the only change in this rule was in number 2, in the middle of the second sentence. The commas in between the commas as defined under state anti-discrimination laws. This is specific to individuals in protected classes. I will note this language was added directly by the Oregon Department of Justice. Does anyone wish to offer comment or question specific to this inclusion?
Somebody want to argue with counsel?
Anyone on the phone? Anyone in the room? All right, as I said, if we move through these other rules that did have substantive changes and there's opportunity and time permits, we will cruise right back to those that we have passed over. I will move on to 410, 141, 3955, transportation service modifications. I will note that in 3B, the change is the words "a direct threat to the driver." Previously, this had read, I'll read it as number 3, a CCO may modify or a member may request modification of NEMT services when the member had a health condition that presents, previously had said, health or safety concern to the driver, others in the vehicle, or members as described in 410, 141, 3950. So that is a change in language from health or safety concern to direct threat to driver. I would like to solicit comment at this time. I'll first go to the phone just by name only. By show of hands in the room. We will start with Jessica Sayers from Pacific Source, then go to Kirk Foster and anyone else that wishes to speak. Go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah, Jessica, Pacific Source. This is in relation to number 1 around passenger rights and responsibilities. I know we briefly talked about that earlier. I would just suggest making sure this language lines up with that, because there are no separate passenger rights and responsibilities outside of regular member rights and responsibilities. So this feels like an addition, and if it's not, I think this language needs to be updated.
So are you suggesting that the word passenger causes some heartburn specifically, and and I'm just trying to synthesize that, are you requesting that that word be changed to member?
I think that would help alleviate some of the issues, but then to the gentleman up here's point earlier, there should be some member rights and responsibilities added to the current rule in relation to transportation.
Thank you, appreciate that. All right, next up. Actually, Robin, sit tight one sec, sorry. Thank you, go ahead, Chris.
I think Chris Lyon, Transit. My concern is if you take out, if you just are adding direct threat without taking out the potential for harm related to other health conditions, that really limits, because we do have individuals that can only be transported alone due to their health care, and that's a modification that we have to make so that it's not a shared ride. And that doesn't have anything to do with a threat to the driver, but it has to do with the threat to the actual member of not being exposed to others.
So, Chris, if you were to offer up a recommendation to read as a continuous sentence in that rule, what might that look like to you?
You would ask me that.
Yes, I would.
Has a health condition that I think, again, presents a direct threat to the driver or to the driver, others in the vehicle, or themselves.
Or something to that effect. Okay, thank you for that. We do appreciate, and we will go to Jessica. We'll go to Robin, sorry.
Robin from UHA, just a comment under section 1, including the right to file a complaint. I would suggest that this be changed to grievance just to align with other language.
Thank you for that. And opportunity on the phone very quickly before we go to Holly from Legal Aid of Oregon. All right, Holly.
Julia?
Julia, we will get back to you momentarily. Holly, go ahead.
Just made an observation on number 1.
The information is provided in general information materials such as handbooks. I'm wondering if it should also be available with each driver in each car.
And that's a request, recommendation for a rule change? Okay, thank you. We do appreciate. And coming back, was that Julia on the phone?
Two things. One is wanting to actually advocate for a re-edition of the old language that references from the language of a health or safety concern.
Okay.
I don't believe the current language, the proposed change language includes public health concerns, such as bed bugs being spread through vehicles unknowingly, and being able to protect the brokerages and the drivers and providers and other members when those cases come up, to limit someone's ability to continue spreading said public health concern is one example.
Okay.
So that's just the one thing. And then the second, for the point of clarification on the discussion of has a health condition that presents a direct threat to the driver, was that being requested to be wordsmithed, or was that being requested to be added in? I didn't quite catch that part.
I think the request, I don't want to speak on the individual's behalf, was an add-on. Yes, it was an add-on request.
To what number?
It was to 2 or 3B rather.
That same one.
Same one that you're speaking to.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. I know we have Kirk wanting to speak. Can I just get a show of hands if there will be anyone else? All right, we will do Kirk, Carrie Trapp, Sarah Dobra, and then Rebecca Miller, and we will time out on this one, and we will circle back if time permits. So Kirk, go ahead.
Kurt Foster with Waco Shores Successful Transportation. Just wanted to reiterate the idea of reciprocal rights versus responsibilities. Just to reiterate my previous point that, again, we're lacking a passenger rights section, and we should add that in somewhere.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go to Carrie, and then Sarah, sorry.
We are wrestling and would like to see some guidance in regards to infection transmission precautions and communication with NEMT providers. There was an Oregon administrative rule about communicable diseases that we're supposed to be communicating, but it's kind of a gray area for us what we can and can't release. So guidance.
So some recognition of infection control.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Let me recognize Sarah Dobra from the OHA Ombuds program. And then Rebecca, sorry, you'll be next.
Sarah Dobra, OHA Ombuds program, and echoing comments made by a couple others, but some specific language around member rights. I might suggest changing the title of this to read from Transportation Service Modifications to read Transportation Provider, CCO, and Member Rights. And then specific language to include, to echo both the provider and member rights could include under 3 of NEMT services with the member or driver, and then calling out member and driver specific reasons why they might change or modify how services are providing. So for example, C is currently when the member engages in behavior or circumstances that place the drivers or others in the vehicle at harm or risk. We would add in below that when the driver engages in behaviors or circumstances that places the member or others in the vehicle at risk of harm. So echoing that and mirroring that language throughout to echo and give specific recommendations.
Thank you. And Rebecca Miller from Washington County.
Rebecca Miller, Washington County Disability Aging and Veteran Services. Down in 5A, communicate about the reason for imposing a modification, how and when, and in what mode. It seems like that needs to be addressed. There's some vagaries throughout. So then back up at DF, frequently cancels the ride on the day of the scheduled ride time. What constitutes frequent? Who gets to decide? I think that's it.
All right. Thank you. Can I just see by quick show of hands before I go to Chris Lyon? All right, we're going to do Chris Lyon, Cynthia Ackerman, Holly from Oregon Legal Aid, and we will time out on this one, but we may circle back if time permits.
I just want to make a quick recommendation on propensity of no-shows, because there's a lot of difference between one person that has 3 rides and no-shows one of those 3 versus one person that has 30 rides and no-shows 3 of those. Under ADA paratransit, we have to look at a propensity of no-shows, so we have a percentage of no-shows that we do before we apply any type of sanctions or modifications. So that might be something to
So
look
there's
at.
to do a listen check, there's a threshold for for your contracts as
For
being an
under
ADA provider?
paratransit, for applying a modification to a pattern of no-shows,
Okay.
there must be a certain percentage
Okay.
versus a particular number.
Appreciate that, and I think, Kian, you likely will be investigating what those standards are. All right, thank you. All right, Ross, I got to honor the queue that I have going here, which is Cynthia and then Holly.
Cynthia from All Care. Going back up to number 3, and you get down from about, actually almost all of those, down to 4. I wish there was language in there that would state the necessity of circling back to care coordinators or case managers, because there could be other reasons behind that, and I just think there should be involvement of the care team. It's mentioned down in number 6, but I think that section warrants adding it there. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you very much. Absolutely. All right, appreciate that. Ross, I will give you, or I'm sorry, Holly, go ahead. And then Ross, I'm going to give you 30 seconds after Holly.
Oregon Law Center, and I will be 30 seconds. Number 4 goes along, well, actually the whole section I would like to encourage on the right section. But reasonable accommodations or modifications should not be discouraged.
Thank you. All right, Ross, go ahead, last call.
If we can match ADA paratransit rules, it helps in creating consistency across human service transportation programs, and that's a good thing.
All right, we appreciate that follow-up comment. All right, I'm going to close comment on 3955. I'm going to note for the public record that 410-141, 3475, which was the hearings rule tied to NEMT specifically, has been added or baked into one of the existing rules. So that has been repealed, but that language does not go away. With that said, I'm going to move us on to 410-141, 3965. This is reports and transportation, reports and documentation. In brief, the entirety of number 3 is a new requirement. It is consistent with new contract requirements. We are at about 10 to 12 minutes. Happy to open this up for conversation. I will time us out at 3:20 to begin the public comment period. Can I just do a phone check-in first to see who wishes to speak to this?
Julia?
And anyone else besides Julia? All right, I'm going to give Julia opportunity to go first, then we will go Dave and then Jessica and around the table that way. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was on mute. Requesting that language be changed from documentation of rides to documentation of NEMT requests, something to that nature. I think rides is implying that the documentation that would be existing would be for vehicle rides only and not would be applicable for reimbursement or public transit. So making sure that language aligns with the full array of options considered available under the benefit.
Great. Thank you for that, Julia. We do appreciate it. All right, we're going to go around the room this time, and I'm going to acknowledge to folks that there may not be a second pass. So I'm going to acknowledge, please be brief, but also please be cognizant that your time affords others. It may take away the opportunity for others to comment as well.
Dave Daly, Multnomah County Aging Services Advisory Council. This would be the place to require some reporting about what contractual requirements exist for non-emergency medical transportation between the CCO and the providers. What are the standards that they're requiring of those providers, and be able to report on and make available to their rider community what is the current level of providers' compliance with those metrics, so that we actually get some ability to see what they're doing. Because one of our problems is we can't really tell. You hear complaints: are we doing great? Are we making progress? Are we regressing? You got to be able to shine a light on it and measure it in order to be able to manage it.
Understood. Thank you. We appreciate that.
Yeah, Jessica Sayers, Pacific Source. The 3 calendar years referenced in number 2 for record retention also needs to be updated here to 10 years if that's the intention. And then down in 3G talks about notice of action needs to be changed to ABD as well. And I agree with the comment on the phone on number 1 around documentation. It's not just rides that any MT do, they do grievances and all sorts of other things that need to be retained.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And continuing around the table, anyone in between Jessica and Holly that wishes to speak? You may not get a second pass. Go ahead, Holly.
Holly Paddock, Oregon Law Center. In terms of member rights and clients returning, I'm on number 4, returning any documentation that is required. This should be date stamped and time stamped. Particularly when for the people who have regular medical needs such as dialysis, chemotherapy, radiation. If it comes in on a Friday, the dates should be counted consecutively from when they get their reimbursement, and it should count on the day that they submit it. Also, for those people who, if it is put into rule that they arrange their appointments 30 days, 45 days in advance for those regular appointments, that there be a possible recommendation for prepay on their Relia cards, if that is the most convenient way for them to attend their appointments. It's very easy to check that they've been there. This is life-sustaining type appointments.
Thank you for that. And just as a point of clarification on the prepay card, for those that may not be tracking that, you're speaking of a card that a brokerage may issue to an individual for frequently occurring rides. All right, thank you very much. We appreciate that. Bill.
Sorry, it wasn't microphone prepared. Let's see. It would be helpful to, in 6B, to reinstate the timeframes that were in the old rule.
We are on 3965. I'm not tracking a number 6 there. My apologies.
I'd love to come back to 60.
All right. As time permits, we may do that. Go ahead.
Les Rogers from Healthcare for All of Oregon. I'm just going to echo the comments from my fellow RAC member from Multnomah County that I feel like, I read all through this, and we keep these records, but who's looking at them? And I would love to get like an aggregated, review of the year or something for denial. So if we can identify something that can be addressed, that'd be great. And when I say we, perhaps the Community Advisory Council for the CCO could look at it. Along with members in the community, and try to find ways to troubleshoot issues that might be arising.
Appreciate that comment and feedback. Thank you. Casey, last chance for you before we go to Rebecca. Okay?
Rebecca Miller, Washington County. Echoing Dave and Les on that, as someone used to support advisory councils, that was a point of frustration, is not knowing what the performance measures were for the contractors. So as a suggestion, there's a section of transparency. Perhaps that could be a place where performance measurement is shared. If we can't see the whole contract once it's executed, can we see what those performance metrics are and have some measure for reporting?
Thank you for that. Oren, do you wish to? All right, I'm going to do last pass on the phone for this rule. Anyone wish to speak to 3965? No. All right, I'm going to return to 3960. I'm going to time limit us at 6 minutes, and I'm going to welcome Bill Buska from IHN Samaritan to speak to number 6 on that rule if he wishes to.
Yes, I would. So in 3960, in number 6B, or section 6B, in the old rule it had specific time frames, it's sort of like breakfast, lunch, and dinner spelled out, and that really helps with reimbursement. It reduces argument, you know what the per diem rate is for breakfast, and just this 4-hour time frame just will add conflict unnecessarily.
Okay, thank you for that comment. And just to level set for folks, this is 410-141-3960 transportation. This is member reimbursed mileage, meals, and lodging. I'm seeing Cynthia's hand up. Can I just do a show of hands? Anyone else that wishes? All right, Cynthia, go ahead.
Yes, under 3960, section 11, it talks about the CCO may recover overpayments made to a member. I do think there needs to also be language about potential fraud, and then to take those necessary steps.
Would you care to offer any proposed language or random thoughts?
I can submit that,
okay.
But it has to do with fraudulently sending in where people have supposedly received rights when they really didn't.
Okay. Thank you. I'm tracking that. I'd like to invite anyone on the phone that might wish to speak to this rule. All right, I'm not seeing anyone. We're showing about 4 minutes left. Dave, would you like to speak? Actually, I think we're going to eat that 4 minutes up. Let's go. Nope. All right, we're going to go back to Bill Buska, I think back to Cynthia, and then back to Jessica for last words on this.
Oh, on the same rule?
Yes.
I have one other rule that we skipped that I wanted to make a comment on. Agreed.
All right, and that rule is?
3950, transportation modifications.
All right, we are going to revisit for all of the next 3 minutes and 44 seconds, 410, 141, 3950, and we will allow Bill and Cynthia to speak to this rule.
Okay, excellent. So just a quick comment that I think the title of this chapter is unnecessarily using the term.
I'm sorry, one more time.
That the title says modifications for individuals with disabilities. It unnecessarily uses the term disabilities because these modifications could be for anybody, and then you go into describing direct threat as the first thing. So just linking disabilities with direct threat, I don't think it's necessary to state the title.
Understood and appreciate that. Thank you. Cynthia.
Yes. But I have a comment on 3965.
All right, we are going to return to 3965.
It's a good comment.
All right.
It has to do with what was discussed about common metrics, but I'm going to take it a step further and suggest talking with Ross and Rachel at break. It would be nice to have a work group that addresses a common tool. That would be one way that you get consistency measured across the state and across providers of transportation services.
Thank you for that recommendation. We absolutely will take it under advisement. I do appreciate. At this time, I'm going to close. Oh, Jessica, I apologize. You do get last.
Said I could go last.
Yes, I did. We're going to honor that. Sorry.
Sorry, Ralph and I have been hanging out for 2 weeks. This is in relation to 3945, section 5. This talks about the CCO shall verify that the authority has licensed providers, and I'm a little confused at why we would verify your work. We will make sure that the providers have a Medicaid ID number.
Okay.
But CCOs verifying the authority's providers just seems like it's either worded wrong or I'm not sure of the intent.
We will go back and take a look at that. I'm not going to speculate too much on that at this time, but thank you. All right. Appreciate everyone's participation today and input. Again, friendly reminder, next Wednesday, close of business. You have to submit additional written comments that can include proposed language. If so, please identify obviously where you think it should land and what it should replace. Close of business next Wednesday. Thank you all for your participation today. We are going to begin public comment at this time. Bill, if I can actually ask you to step aside, I think we're going to, and perhaps move over, we're going to ask you that, we're going to use the chair that you're sitting in right there in the middle for public comment. We do have 4 individuals that wish to speak today. Our total public comment period will be 10 minutes. That means each of those 4 will be afforded 2.5 minutes. Kim will give the go signal, and she will raise her hand when the person has 15 seconds left. So please be mindful of that. We're going to welcome in the following order: Patty Blanton, Barb Rainish, then William Mary from Paradigm Driving, and then Justin Alderman, the CEO of IDAT Solutions. So if I can welcome Patty Blanton, please.
Yes, first I want to say I'm the most grateful rider that Ride the Care has. But there are some issues, for instance, the preferred provider program.
Patty, may I ask if you hold the microphone just a little closer to your mouth? I want to make sure everyone on the phone has opportunity to hear you as well.
The preferred provider program, I live in a building of elderly and disabled, and it just doesn't seem to be working for anyone. And I do not get my preferred provider most of the time, and I would always call the preferred provider, and they would say, we were never offered your ride. And if they had been given this one particular ride, I'm 81, I have a heart condition, I have spinal cord injury and stage 3 kidney disease, and because I had to sit on a wet diaper for so many hours, I have been battling a kidney infection for close to 3 months now. And we can't get it under control. And some of these things have long-lasting effects. And had I been given my preferred provider, this would not have happened, because they're always there. They're always there on time. If they're 5 or 10 minutes late, they will call you and let you know. And I schedule my rides 30 days, 2 weeks in advance. And there's no reason why they should not get those rides much earlier than they do. And Broadway Dispatch said last week that they dump all these rides on them, and they never ask how many vans they have on the road. And so they said that's why they're always late, because they're really making every effort to fulfill these rides. And, you know, it's like, I think we should be able to call the provider directly. I'm optimistic. I always think, well, I'm not going to have a prescription. And ends up I do, so I need to stop at the pharmacy. Well, the pharmacy's close enough that I take myself home. You know, I'm not going to ask them to rearrange their schedule. But I should be able to call the provider and ask to be dropped off at the pharmacy. But you can't get through the call center. By the time you do, you're home.
Okay. And Patty, we appreciate you sharing your story with us today. It makes it real for everyone in the room, and we appreciate you submitting your public comment today. We thank you very much. And I'm going to recognize Barb Rainish as our second public comment offerer today. Kim will go ahead and give you the nod right now, 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Okay. Anyway, I basically just sort of have a list, not in any particular order. Definitely on the grace periods for the training for the riders, the 6 months is way too long. I mean, that stood out, you guys discussed it. And yeah, something shorter or not at all, basically, as far as the grace period. And in order to do that, from what I've heard from people, hiring more trainers might be where the stopgap is for that. So I'm going to suggest that you guys request that or look to that and have that as part of the rules, that the trainers need to be available. Where you say that it needs to have, they need to have an 800 number, they also need to track the hold times, and there needs to be metrics and there needs to be expectations, and the people that have been being left on hold really deserve compensation for that time that they've spent basically on their Obama phones, using up all their minutes. And then communication and preferred providers. I'm not sure if we need to use the term reasonable accommodation. in order to get people with their preferred providers. But we know from experience that that's saved lives. So I just highly recommend that. And then the last thing, when you guys were talking about having attendance, I'm not sure, I think you guys need to spell out that a patient can have an attendant and a family member with them at no charge, based on what you were talking about, lifting, etc. And I want to thank everybody.
And we thank you for your comments today. We thank you for coming in with 11 seconds to spare. And your participation is incredibly important in this process, so thank you again for that. I'd like to call William Mary from the Paradigm Driving. William, 2.5 minutes on Kim's Go.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So I have a few things I want to comment on. Section 3920, I think there should be added language in there. For brokerages, must be required to let members schedule up to 30 days in advance. As we just heard, it is an important thing, especially for those who have ongoing appointments. Moving on to 3925, section 4B under checks and training. I don't believe there should be any exceptions that should be granted for anyone providing NEMT services. If TNC providers are doing the transport, they should have the same background checks and certifications as NEMT providers. To me, it's a great concern because you have these folks coming in that maybe Lyft or Uber that are used to doing Uber and Lyft consistently. And NEMT providers, the drivers are used to dealing with folks that may have mental illness or need additional support physically. And if someone does choose to do a Lyft, it may not mean that they can, that they are in the position to have a Lyft on the way back. Their mental state can change, and as well as their physical state just in between those. So that's something I think should be really looked at and considered when we're dealing with this population. Let's see, section 5B under 3925. I also have the largest driver training group in the state of Oregon, and regarding defensive driving, I think it should be required within 90 days and not 6 months. And also to remove the 3 years that it's required and have everyone reevaluated every 2 years when dealing with that population. And that's all I have. Short and sweet.
Great. Thank you. We appreciate William. Thank you very much for offering your public comment today. We will recognize Justin Alderman from IDAT Solutions. Justin, 2.5 minutes on Kim's Go.
Go.
Thank you very much. Oh, I'm just, is that working? Okay. Yeah, I would like to, red light's good. Just turn it off. My company has a significant amount of experience working with NEMT providers throughout the United States, but we happen to be headquartered here in Kaiser, Oregon. And in a few of the things I heard today on the potential draft rules, I happen to agree with many folks, I think, from several layers, both from transportation providers as well as the hospitals and a few other entities here, that the 30 days for members to be able to book the rides is extremely important. And I think a lot of that gets into their own personal well-being, because I think if they're not aware that they have a transportation book for their appointment, say in a week or 2 weeks, it creates a lot of anxiety, and that those things can greatly impact the health of those patients. I know there's a comment made also to assign it to a provider within 48 hours. I would maybe recommend 72 hours. I think sounds a little bit more appropriate, especially when you're dealing with lower staff on the weekends.
Can I just get clarification? You said what within 72 hours? Sorry.
The assignment of rides from the brokerage or CCO to a transportation provider. I think it was mentioned 48 hours, but I think 72 hours might be a little bit more appropriate for that requirement, considering staffing levels are typically lower on weekends. So if you get a call on Friday, it gives them a little bit more time to deal with it.
Okay.
On section 3955 4B, There's some mention of attendant requirements. This is an issue I've seen throughout the state of Oregon where, well, in many cases, members in certain situations, especially those with memory care issues, need to have an attendant. Many facilities are ignoring their requirements to send an attendant because obviously it's an expensive care facilities. And I've seen this be a major detriment to the safety and health of patients being transported by NEMT providers. And in many cases, brokers are not following up, I think, with those facilities, and they're forcing NEMT providers to do the transportation or essentially giving the trip to a provider who will do it and ignore that requirement and safety of the patient. I believe it's important for some consideration on uniformity between CCO and broker contracts with NEMT providers in the state. It seems that providers are establishing different contracts with different providers, and I think it needs to be a level playing field for all that are involved. And I think that gets into a little bit of what others have mentioned with requirements for background checks.
Justin, thank you. I'm going to interrupt as we're at time. We appreciate your comments today. I see a hand in the back of the room, but public comment has closed at this time. We did solicit opportunities several times throughout the meeting. So.
I was not asked, sir. I drove 3 hours to be here today from Bend, Oregon.
All right. And your name, sir?
Randy Moss with American Medical Transit.
All right, Randy, if you wish, we will grant you the same 2.5 minutes afforded to the other individuals offering comment.
Thank you, sir. I apologize. I was not approached during the break.
Okay.
Not used to meters where we live. We don't have stuff.
All right, on Kim's go and at Kim's direction to stop. Go for it, sir.
Mic check. Red. Good.
Red's
good. Hello? Is it on? Is it on?
One more.
Same 1, 2, sorry. Again, I'm Randy Moss with American Medical Transit. We're an NEMT provider from Bend, Oregon. I would just like to echo some of the comments of RAC member Kirk Foster about the rights of members to schedule rides 30 days in advance. I think it's very important. I would like to see require brokers to schedule rides 48 hours in advance to providers if possible. That allows us to schedule our vehicles and our employees, especially on the weekends like Justin just echoed. I really disagree that we should reduce the background and training requirements of NEMT drivers to accommodate transportation network companies because it creates different standards for competing companies within the same space. But more importantly, it puts cost savings over member safety going forward. Key point I'd like to focus on under general requirements are looking through the lens of a better member NEMT experience. I would like to see a requirement that providers utilize W-2 employees to provide NEMT transportation to critical care or life-sustaining members. And then just to close here, I know we're in short time, I would like to see a consistent policy that all companies that provide NEMT service under the CCO 2.0 rules are subject to the same training and operational standards across the board.
All right. Randy, thank you. We appreciate that. I do want to ask one point of clarification for everyone's benefit. When you speak of W-2 employees, help us under...
That means...
Excuse me. That means an employee that is employed by my company.
A direct employer,
there
not
is a provision in the state that carves out for cab companies to have independent contractors, but I think it's important that the people that are driving for the NEMT service are W-2 employees.
And did you speak to that specifically to individuals? You used the words critical care. I just want to make sure that we capture your comments.
I use critical care and life-sustaining.
And life-sustaining,
so
thank you.
Dialysis and those things, because I think those are a very vulnerable population and they need a consistent transportation option.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you coming all the way over from Bend. Apologies for any delays, and we're glad that we afforded you opportunities, so we appreciate it. All right, everyone, thank you again truly for your participation. That does conclude today's Rules Advisory Committee. Please drive safely home wherever you're going. Individuals on the phone, thank you for your participation today. Bye-bye.